Hello, this is Johnny G with Out is the New In, You Have a Purpose podcast. And today I have the absolute pleasure of introducing Art Estrada, my very good friend, who I've had the opportunity to meet in the mental health arena not that long ago.
No, not that long ago. Thanks for having me, Johnny.
Absolutely. I know you have an amazing story that we've discussed, not completely in detail, but I am so thankful that you are willing to come here and share that story with us.
Absolutely. I was excited to hear about what Out is the New End is doing in the community, and I would really want to just come here and support and tell my story to anyone who may benefit from hearing it, and know that there is always light at the end of a very dark tunnel.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you so much for being here today and taking time out on your busy Saturday.
I appreciate being here.
Excellent. So, if you don't mind, just kind of starting where you would like to and share as much as you would like to share, knowing that this is a very safe space for you.
Absolutely. So, kind of a little bit about me. I grew up in Southern California. I was raised by Mexican-American parents, very traditional, conservative Catholic household. I'm the second of four siblings. I kind of grew up as the oldest, kind of the more responsible eldest sibling. I was pretty active in school. I was always a pretty social kid. But I always kind of really just struggled to fit in with my peers. I knew at a really young age that I was different than the rest of my family, and then the rest of my peers were, than my brothers were, and I really didn't always understand what that meant. I think maybe when I came to about, I would say 11 or 12, that I kind of learned what gay was, and didn't really know who I could talk to about it. I had heard, homophobic slurs even coming from my dad and my brothers and my family. So it was that wasn't a safe space for me to be able to ask those questions and try to understand who I was at the time. So like most kids do, I just kind of hid it and just try to fit in where I could. My story takes a little bit of a dark turn. My parents were very involved in the church, in the Catholic Church at the time, and they had encouraged me to join a church retreat. The church retreat was geared towards kids or young men who were interested in joining the seminary and being part of the clergy. From that, I met this priest who was not part of my parish, but took an interest in me. It's a difficult topic.
Take your time.
He took an interest in me and started spending more time with me outside of the church. He ended up becoming my abuser and abused me for a number of years. And something that I kept secret from my family, from everyone around me, just something that I had to personally endure. And it was very conflicting at the time because I knew I was gay, and I didn't know what the abuse meant at the same time. If I was attracting that attention, if this is something that someone wanted from me. And it just led to just a really dark period of where I just didn't know how to process it, how to deal with it, and how to move on. So it led me down some pretty dark paths. After that, shortly after that, my family relocated to Arizona. And it wasn't until probably a couple of years later that I actually came forth and actually told them what had happened to me. And my parents, really, really tried hard to be supportive of me, but I think they were really struggling with it as well. From the standpoint, I think, now hindsight, after having several conversations, they felt like failures as parents, to their son. They didn't protect me. Right. Like they felt they should have, and but they also didn't know how to talk to me about it either. So instead of really addressing it, it was kind of just, let's put you in therapy and see how that's what's needed. So I went to go see a psychotherapist, and at 16 years old, and I had never had any experience with therapy. Didn't really know what it was or what I was supposed to be doing there. So I was a little resistant at first. I didn't really know how to share or open up or be vulnerable because I was never really shown that. Didn't really know how to do that. And from there, I was, of course, at the same time questioning my sexuality and knowing that I was gay, but not really coming to terms with it because I knew it wasn't accepted by my parents. It was a really dark time for me. I thought about committing suicide several times. I remember being at my parents' house in the kitchen late one night and holding a knife to my wrist, just ready to end it because I just didn't see a way out. Right. And it took a lot of I knew I didn't want to end my life, but I didn't want to feel this pain anymore. I just didn't know of a way out. So from there, I kind of started living a double life. I started really trying to explore my sexuality, maybe not in very healthy ways, seeking out some pretty risky behaviors, but at the same time trying to be the model son that my family wants me to be or expected me to be or depended on me to be. So I did finish high school, and even though, I struggled my sophomore and senior year, but I always knew I wanted to go and help people, so I went into healthcare, and healthcare is kind of where I've always launched my career. And but at the same time, I was really struggling personally with everything that had happened to me not being able to even speak to my parents about who I was and really get that acceptance. And it wasn't until maybe I was like 2021 that I actually came out and told them that I was gay. And that was a very hard conversation. I think my mom and my parents always had suspicions, but they never once asked me. When I did, I think they initially thought it was a phase or something that would grow out of, or just something that I was struggling with. But I was determined to want to live my life honestly, because I felt by not being honest with myself and the people around me was leading me down very dark paths. I started drinking, started dabbling in drugs, partying a lot, and those are the things. It was fun at the time, but I knew had I continued down this path, it would have led. I don't know where it would have led me. So, after struggling with telling my parents that I was gay, and they didn't accept it. My parents at that point had known about my abuse and had left the Catholic Church, but had converted to Jehovah's Witnesses. So they became a little bit more staunch in their beliefs. And I don't know if you know anything about the Jehovah's Witness religion. They are very devout and very evangelical in their beliefs. So there's not a lot of room for homosexuality or even acceptance of family members with that. So it was, it led to me having a lot of separation from them. At the time I was finishing college and I was living at home, and I had then met my now future husband, David, and my parents had asked me where I was going all the time, what I was doing, and I told them the truth. And I remember something that was very powerful, and I will never forget it. My mom had told me, "I love you, son, but I love my God more." And she told me I couldn't live there anymore. And that day I got up and I left. And I never looked back. It was profound that I could hear that come from my mom, who I thought loved me unconditionally, or where the foundation of unconditional love should come from. And I knew I didn't have that. But at the same time, throughout that feeling of betrayal, that feeling of loss, I knew the only person that I really could rely on was myself. And I knew for me and for everyone around me that I had to prove to everybody and to myself that I can do this on my own. And thankfully, I've had an amazing group of friends, and also my brothers and other members of my family that have been very, very supportive of me over the years and have really helped me be the person that I am today. So I finished school. I continued in my career. Me and my husband got married. We have a very loving in-laws who've accepted me and embraced me as their own son, and I'm very, very thankful for all of them, for all that they've done for me. To this day, I mean, I always clown around and tease them that I'm their favorite son-in-law, and I think they even agree half the time. But I've developed my own family with my husband, with my in-laws. We got 2 dogs, and we've created a lot of memories together.
Right.
And with that, I went back into knowing that I needed some help, even as I was progressing with my career and progressing with my personal relationships. I knew myself that my mental health was still struggling. I was still struggling with the trauma that I had endured, as well as the separation and the betrayal of my family. So I went back into therapy, and luckily I've had a very good therapist for a number of years who has really helped support me in my journey and also helped with a lot of the healing that I needed to have happen. I think what people don't understand a lot of times with sexual assault and trauma is that there's a lot of guilt and shame that ends up developing from the victim's side, even though I know I was 12 years old and I know it wasn't something that I was asking for. You feel some sense of responsibility.
For sure.
And for a long time, I held that. I held that, and I didn't always understand, because that was essentially my first sexual experience. I didn't always understand what a healthy sexual relationship looked like, or what a healthy intimate relationship looked like. So that carried into my marriage, and I had some struggles with that, but I really wanted to get past it. I didn't want this to be my crutch and the thing that was holding me back the rest of my life. So I dug deep in therapy and had some very difficult conversations with myself, with my parents. I set some very healthy boundaries. For a long time, even as my parents told me of my disapproval, I still kept trying to plead to them, to be there for them, to try to get them to accept me for who I was. And I'm happy to say it's taken a number of years, but I have a way healthier relationship with my mom now. Me and my dad's relationship has gotten somewhat better, and they've become more accepting of me and my husband. It's not perfect. I don't think it ever will be. But I think it took me kind of setting some healthy boundaries with them, letting them know who I am, and I wasn't going to change that for them. And also for them seeing me thrive. I'm very happy that I've been able to have a very successful career in healthcare, and I've done numerous things from sleep medicine to business development to now behavioral health. And I'm happy to be on the other side of this and feel like I'm no longer a victim anymore of what happened to me when I was a kid. Or I'm no longer a victim of my parents not accepting me for being who I am. I feel like in many ways these challenges helped strengthen me as a person, strengthen my resolve, and help me to be the person that I've become today.
First and foremost, I am so glad that you chose to stay, right? We all have a purpose, a path, a plan for our lives, right? I'm a firm believer of that. I look back on some things that occurred in my life, and if they didn't occur, I wouldn't be right here where I'm at right now today.
I agree.
Right? And when it comes to parents, baby steps, right? And what I took is that at least those baby steps are going in a positive direction, which we have to absorb, right? So I'm so glad to be sitting here with you today to have this conversation and for you to share your story.
Thank you. And I agree. I think initially, when you're becoming acceptance of when you're accepting who you are as your own person, for being homosexual, for being different, part of the LGBTQ community, I think the first thing you want is acceptance from everyone else, and your parents. And I'm realizing now I've given my parents a lot of grace and helped them. They grew up in a different time, in a different generation where there was a lot of fear and a lot of bias around homosexuality. And I think they still stick with that. And I've learned with therapy that sometimes I have to see my parents not as my parents, but just as humans, that have their own journey and they have their own lived experiences. Right. And I'm trying to give them a level of grace that I think everyone deserves. Right. It's taken time, but it's
yes. And we have time, right?
Right.
And we hope that through that process that baby steps continue to move forward.
Yep.
Right? And you can build on a better and better relationship with them moving forward.
Right.
Because we all should be allowed to be our authentic, unique self, whatever that is.
Right.
And love whoever we want to love.
Right.
And those are the words that I told my son Chase when he came out. I was told to prepare that Chase is gay when he was 5. And he did come out at 17. And like you said, you knew around 11 that you were different.
Yeah.
Right? And I just look back and go, I had no idea that my higher power would present a gay child to me. But he's my child. And it was, no matter who he is and who he chooses to be with and love, he's my son. And when you touched on unconditional love, that's what we do for our children.
Right.
But I have met so many people that have been in your position where parents are not accepting, whether that's just how they were raised or their belief in their religion, and did not accept their child.
Yeah, and I think as I've learned kind of more about my parents' struggle with my homosexuality, and it's helped me to understand, as I've seen their struggle in the sense where I know they love me as their son. Right. I know there's this big part of me that they don't really approve of, but yet their beliefs around it aren't supported by my lived experience. I think they were told at a time that like people who were gay were drug addicts, or they were sexual deviants, or whatever the case may be, and they see this relationship that I've built with my husband and how we live our lives and how successful we are in our careers, and how we're loved by the many people that we have around us, and it contradicts their own beliefs or their own biases with it. I think me living my authentic truth has helped them move that pendulum for themselves. And understand that not every gay person is the same, and these ideas of what they've been told what a gay person is aren't always true.
Hello, this is Johnny G. We're going to take a break and come back for the second half of our conversation with Art Estrada.